About 3 weeks ago, I received a call from this woman, and since that time, we seem to have done an article. We seem to have been committed to a number of different speaking engagements. And whenever, in this day and age, you begin doing business with someone, you're always curious how that's going to end up. The experience with Clarion Events has been one of which just incredible professionalism, competence, and great fun. And I just absolutely want to thank Ever for all the help she's been. She's just been tremendously fun to work with. I need to, that's me. This is my topic. I want to make a few comments before I begin. For if it is the circumstance that I say something educational, enlightening, intelligent, or dare I say brilliant, that is wholly attributable to the great governor I serve, Edmund G. Brown Jr., who appointed me into office, the wonderful legislature of the state of California that confirms my appointment and approves my salary, and the people of the great state of California. Although my girlfriend suggested on the phone she was also responsible for any good that comes of me. If by chance I am to say something ignorant, ill-informed, inappropriate, that's this person's responsibility. Was that a bullshit alarm that went on? Excuse me. I want to make two additional points, and that is I do not have an opinion on whether we should or should not have internet gaming. Because the second I had an opinion, there'd be someone waiting for me at the airport in Sacramento, curious as to what my next career choice was going to be. I am not advocating anything. My involvement is as an economist because I spent 4 years in an undergraduate, 2 years in a master's, and 5.5 years in a PhD program in economics, and some of that stuck. It is as a regulator because my PhD dissertation topic for 2.5 years was the Nevada gambling regulatory experience, and I was licensed in over 60 different environments. Mainly, I worked in 6 or 7, and then I went on the board of directors of Shufflemaster, and that puts you on that licensing carousel. And so you learn some things about licensing when you've been licensed that many times. And as a casino guy, I dealt cards and dice at night to support my college education and worked my way up through the organization, eventually became a president and CEO of a casino company in Las Vegas. Like so many things in my life, I got it backwards. You're supposed to be a regulator so that you can then get the big money in the industry. I got it backwards, and my trajectory's been down. I was 60 years old, and I chose to work for the state. And had I known, I'd never worked for a government before, had I known I was going to experience that, I would have read 2 books much more closely. Machiavelli's The Prince and Alice in Wonderland. But having said that, let's move on. I think it's absolutely wonderful to talk about this topic in this part of the world. Many centuries ago in this part of the world, there was an absolutely fundamental transition. People went from an agrarian society into one that was driven by machinery. And that transition was known as a revolution, and that revolution was the Industrial Revolution, and it was led by technology. And there were people that tried to stop that revolution. And I think when you try and stop true technological revolutions, it's like standing in the beach and trying to hold back the water. You can hold it back a little bit. And in this part of the world, the lower classes, many of them wore a shoe. Whoops, I want to back up one point, one second. I'm from California, and I'm going to turn you, when you go home and say, they're going to say, what did you learn? Why did we pay for all that money? I want you to tell them something that no one in the United States seems to know. The people in Vegas don't know it, the gaming press doesn't know it, the AP doesn't know it, no one knows it. California is the largest gaming state in the nation. True story. We have a tribal gaming segment that is absolutely unbelievable. It is some of the most well-designed, casinos on the planet. And some people don't know that. They're also extraordinarily well managed, and they are well regulated. And when I say they're well regulated, that's not kudos to me, because they regulate themselves to a large extent. As a matter of fact, in some ways, they're better than we are. I think they're a bit more committed to the cause, but don't take that home, please. We also have, in our tribal segment, we have both Class 3 and Class 2 type games. We have card rooms, this curious historical thing. We have third-party providers. California is kind of like the Galapagos Islands. It's this weird evolutionary forms of gambling that have developed that you can't even explain, and the third-party providers are a perfect example of that. We have horse racing. We have satellites, mini satellites, charitable bingo, advanced deposit wagering. You add all those things up, Nevada's second, and then Pennsylvania's third. So when the AP says things like Pennsylvania just slid into second place, not true. Not true. And so when people say things like that, you can now just have this smug little knowledge and understanding that, in fact, California is the largest gaming state in the nation. We were talking about this revolution away from an agrarian lifestyle into a technologically driven lifestyle in the factory system. It had some implications. The people in this time wore a shoe, and this shoe was made out of wood. Oftentimes it was Dutch oak. And the shoe was very hard. And some people didn't like this revolution that was taking place, moving them away from the land, into the factories. And the factories weren't always pleasant, and they didn't have very good sanitary systems, and there were a lot of negative attributes about this experience. And so they would take their shoes, and these shoes were called sabots. And some of you from this part of the world know that. And these shoes were called sabots, and they would take these sabots and stuff it into the gears of the machinery to destroy that process, to hold that process back. And this is where we get the word sabotage. This is where we get saboteurs. We are now in the midst of another revolution. That revolution is a computer revolution, it's a microchip revolution, it's a data revolution, and it's an internet revolution. And that revolution will take hold throughout the world. It has changed a great many of our delivery systems. Just about everything we know about can now be acquired through the internet. And it probably, one would think, will impact our ability to deliver gaming services. That's my guess. There will also be people in that route that will be stuffing shoes into the gears of that machine. They will not want that change. And I think you can look around in this country and look at there were people, there's still some vestiges of that past system. They're called castles. And my guess is after the internet revolution works through its cycle, that you will be able to go in the United States and see palaces and castles, which are vestiges of the prior order. That's just my guess. But let's move on a bit. This woman lived in the neighborhood. Her name's Queen Anne. Some of you have heard of her. If you ever tried to collect a gaming debt, you may have heard of the law of Queen Anne. It's often used as a precedent. She argued that gaming debts were uncollectible. And she did that because a lot of the old order, the landed aristocracy, or especially their kids, were wandering down to the casinos, these dens of iniquity, and they were losing money. And not only did they lose money that they lost money that they didn't have with them through the instrument of credit. And so this woman said, we cannot have this. In around 1711, we need to stop the collection of gaming debts. And the reason she did it wasn't because of any concerns over the vulnerable or anything like that. She didn't want the upper classes' wealth being transferred to the lower classes, the gambling operators. And so that's where that law came about. But she's also very material because apparently she was a bit moody. And if you look at one of the laws that was passed during this time, it was a law that said, in order to protect the Queen's peace, in order to keep her happy, these gambling establishments needed to be looked after. And they needed to be looked after by fit and proper gentlemen. That, folks, is the model we use in the United States. Who regulates our gambling? Not experienced gamblers, not people with any experience like that, but fit and proper gentlemen and sometimes ladies. I had to be clean, so to speak, for 2 years before I could serve on the gambling commission. I could not have had any income coming from a gambling job. And because I had been teaching casino management and regulation in Switzerland and in China and at the University of Nevada, and I had been working for the state of Kansas as a consultant, I was purified. I had been away from the casino for 2 years, and I was therefore qualified to be a regulator. And that fascinated me. You can't imagine the feeling I had when I met that 2-year threshold when the sin of gambling was lifted from me. It was truly a spiritual experience. But this is the one we owe to it. So you end up with a lot of people that aren't exactly sure what they're doing when they're regulating gambling. The other thing that you're going to need to understand, those that are interested in coming to the United States, is that you will be dealing with a monopoly. There won't be a trade show where you can pick your regulator. If you're doing business in California, you will have one choice as to who you're going to be regulated, as the law now stands, if it were to pass, and that would be the regulators in the state of California. So you're stuck with me because the governor just appointed me for 4 more years. You know. But there's not going to be any voting on who you want to be regulated by. You know, you're going to have one choice as states implement. And some of the things, these are things that I think are going to be of interest to the states. And if you're not familiar with the U.S. regulatory model, I thought I'd walk through some of these steps. The first, there's going to be, and you're going to want to have safeguards to ensure the integrity of the games offered. Simple stuff. That will probably be done where it's done by privatized firms. In the old days, we had labs, gaming labs, but that model no longer works. The people in the labs, they're not scalable. There's a lot of institutional problems with that. Sometimes, in some states, not ours, but in some states, the really talented get picked up by private enterprise, and the less talented have a tendency to hang out for a long time. And that presents difficulties. But even Nevada has given up on having the big lab. They rely on outside firms, and that's going to be the model that happens here. And this is a very important and difficult area in legislation, because in establishing your technical standards, one, you want to be careful that you don't specify a particular technology or a particular brand with your technical specs. And the second thing, you want to leave room to grow. What I'm suggesting there is this. Steve Jobs had this wonderful notion that I don't do market research and ask people what they want because they don't know what they want because it hasn't been invented yet. And we need to develop technical specifications that, quite frankly, as technology changes, it doesn't hinder the operators that are involved in that process. You know, because if you have to go back to the legislature to get a bill changed so you can adopt some new technological process, that's a dangerous engagement. Because, number one, that's a slow process. And then when you get into that process, all kinds of other things may come into play. One of the people on that committee can say, you know, it's kind of, we've got this, we want to buy some school books for our school system, and wouldn't this be a nice place to add a little tax? Or we may want to, you know, my cousin's hairdresser's wife had a problem with gambling, and we need more controls on that end. All kinds of things can happen when this goes back to the legislature. So you want to evolve that. So the whole technical standard piece sounds easy, but it's very difficult because you don't want to inhibit the growth of the industry, and you're looking forward to technologies you don't even know or understand.